In order to exploit how popular westerns were in American cinema, Italians started to make their own westerns, and in true exploitation fashion, they attracted audiences by offering films which were a bit more violent, a bit grimier, had attractive characters who were quite a bit more morally ambiguous than their American counterparts. So yeah, it's no surprise that I really like them. Welcome to Exploitation Reviews, and me, Rob. I've covered a few spaghetti slashers on the channel. That's another term for giallo films, by the way. But I haven't covered a spaghetti western yet, and that's going to change today. Without question, the best Italian director of westerns is Sergio Leone. There's no arguing about that, it's just a fact. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is perhaps the best Italian western ever made, and if it's not the best, then Once Upon a Time in the West is. Either way, Sergio Leone. But the second best Italian director of westerns is Sergio Corbucci, and there's really no arguing about that either, it's just a fact. So, how did the second best Italian director of westerns compete with the first best Italian director of westerns? Well, he did it by giving us a film which is quite possibly the most violent western ever. Django. Yeah, that's what I said. And the strategy worked. This is a fan-favorite film that has inspired many copies and reimaginings and remakes and unofficial sequels. There are literally dozens of films with Django in the title because of this movie. In fact, you've probably seen at least one of them. Django. Anyway, we open on walking through the mud, dragging a coffin. And if this isn't one of the coolest images in westerns, I don't know what is. So, Django. So, our hero comes across a few bad hombres tying up a woman and whipping her. And then the bad hombres are all killed, but not by Django. Nope, not him. It was a different group of bad hombres. Don't worry, one of the groups wears red, so we can keep them apart. So, how do I know this group is also bad? Well, after they save that woman, they say they're going to crucify her and burn her alive. So yeah, they're pretty bad. But finally, Django inserts himself into the situation. He takes the woman to a nearby town, tries to get her a room at a whorehouse, but the proprietor is not super happy to have her there. The proprietor explains that there are two parties in the area which are kind of at war with each other. There are these Mexican revolutionaries, and there's Mr. Jackson's group. Jackson and his men, you know, those ones that were wearing red before, they're kind of like the Ku Klux Klan. But anyway, this whorehouse is neutral territory. The ladies service both in exchange for protection, basically. So now our hero is sort of in the middle. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, Rob, a morally questionable protagonist in a town that's sort of neutral ground between two warring parties? We've seen this movie before. That's Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars. And you're not wrong. What? That wasn't what you were thinking? Okay, I'll try again. Now, I know what you're thinking. A morally questionable protagonist in a neutral area surrounded by two warring parties. We've seen this movie before. That's Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo. And you're not wrong. Better? Okay. Anyway, Major Jackson shows up and butts heads with Django. Yeah, him. And it doesn't go too well for the Red Scarf Brigade. So, our hero tells Major Jackson that he better show up with more men if he expects to stay safe. And the following day, that's exactly what he does. And we finally find out what Django, yes, him, what he has been keeping in that coffin. You know the great thing about having the Klan as the bad guys is that no matter how many of them get killed, you never feel bad. Well, that Mexican gang is still around, and Major Jackson is still around, and we find out that Major Jackson was responsible for killing Django's wife, or girlfriend? I'm not sure which one. But Django Yeah, him. He's got a plan for all of this. But that's enough out of me as far as plot goes. Let's talk some highlights. This is a really violent movie. It has an extreme body count. It could probably rival your mom's. Sorry, that's a really terrible joke. Just super low-hanging fruit. Kind of like your dad's testicles. I'll stop, I promise. This is a violent movie, though. It was so violent, in fact, it was outright banned in England until the 90s. What the hell, England? Obviously, having a high body count doesn't make the movie good, but it does tie into the pacing of this film, which is very good. I mean, I love Sergio Leone's westerns. I absolutely adore The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, but that's a 3-hour-long movie. I mean, it is a bit of a commitment to sit through that thing. I like sitting through that thing, but it is a commitment. Django? Yes, this movie is only about 90 minutes. You can watch this twice in the time it takes you to watch The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. There is something to be said for that. Beyond the violence, I gotta give it up to Franco Nero. Man, what a cool face that guy has. Okay, maybe it's not quite as cool as Eastwood's from around the same time, but second place isn't too bad considering the competition. And finally, I really like the cinematography / general aesthetics of this film. The mud and the coffin dragging and those bright red hoods. It looks just cool. To use the parlance of my daughter, I would say it has a vibe. A really great vibe. But the movie's not perfect. Like a whorehouse gal on neutral ground, it has some shortcomings. Well, there's not really a whole lot I don't like about this movie, but I do wish it had a better dub. Franco Nero speaks English, but they didn't use his voice to do the English dub here, and that's really kind of unfortunate. And his English dub sounds kind of, I don't know, like too clean-cut or wimpy or something. I can't quite put my finger on it.
She told you that she doesn't want to. So let her go.
And you could solve this problem a bit by just watching the movie in Italian, but weirdly enough, it's not even his own voice in the Italian version of this movie, because Sergio Corbucci didn't think he sounded old enough, so he redubbed him with an older actor. So, no matter what, you're not going to hear Franco Nero's voice. But I guess overall, since the other English voice actors aren't that great either, maybe the best option just is to watch it in Italian. I suppose that depends on what you think about dubs in general. Personally, I don't like dubs, like hardly ever, but I do forgive them with Italian exploitation films because they were used as a tool of independent filmmaking. It allowed Italian filmmakers to pull actors from all over Europe, and then everyone just spoke their own language, and then you overdub the whole thing anyway. So, in those kinds of cases, it's totally forgivable. Beyond the dub issues, there's not much to complain about here. This is a fun, fast-paced, ultra-violent Western, and it's a really good place to jump into if you want to start getting into spaghetti Westerns. Sure, it's not as serious or as epic as something like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but you can watch it in half the time.